Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. The SNP tried to introduce the Gender Identity Bill. This allowed people to simply change their gender by self-declaration. And they said that it was a fine and worthy act, and that nobody would ever change their identity simply to commit a crime or to escape the punishment for that crime. That wouldn't happen. Well, of course, this is a fallacious argument, because that is exactly what is happening, as events shown this week will prove. They must address the elephant in the room, and the elephant in this case is Andrew Miller, the Beast of Montrose, who, as Amy George, lured a child into his car before using and abusing her terribly. I think she was very lucky to get out of this alive. But now that that elephant in the room is definitely there and people are talking about it, it's time for the SNP to come clean and address the problem. We'll take a look at this article. It addresses the problem for them. They, of course, are still in a state of denial. Here goes. So, the conviction of the trans butcher beast dispels argument over self-ID and predators abusing the GRR bill, says MSP. Shona Robertson, MSP, once claimed that there was no evidence predators had to pretend to be anyone else in order to target victims, but the latest horror case dispels her argument, according to Rachel Hamilton. And of course it does. Andrew Miller, he dressed as a woman. He lured that young girl into his car. He did then terrible things over the course of a day. Like I say, she was very lucky, I think, to get out of that situation alive. The conviction of Andrew Miller has massively undermined the SNP's argument that predators will not use self-ID at the centre of their gender policy to target girls, according to a Conservative MSP. Transgender butcher, who's also known as Amy George, was wearing a dress when he abducted a girl earlier this year. Since his conviction, there have been questions around which prison he will be kept in, given he claims to be a woman. First, Humza Yousaf was unable to guarantee he will be kept in the male estate, and now the SNP's core belief that the self-assertion is enough to verify someone's sex is under further attack. Now, he will be going to a male prison. It actually has, since this was written, it has been confirmed, because he just isn't in a state to go to a woman's prison. I've done a report on him. I did a video on him. You saw what he looks like. There's no way that even they will not put this man into a woman's prison. Anyway, the then social justice minister Shona Robertson claimed in Parliament last year that there is no evidence that predatory and abusive men have ever had to pretend to be anything else to carry out abusive and predatory behaviour. And faced with her claims, Miss Robinson, who is now the Deputy First Minister, said the vast majority of trans people just want to get on with their lives. Of course, we're talking here about people who have committed very serious crimes. I wouldn't want to talk about the case because it's still ongoing. No, it isn't. This is, again, still the SNP using that line of, oh, it's an ongoing case, we can't talk about it, because actually you can talk about ongoing cases. Senior policemen have said this. But also, the case is not ongoing. The case is over. He's guilty. It's just waiting for his sentencing. But the actual case itself is gone. So she can talk fully about it. This is just one of those I don't want to talk about it because I'm very embarrassed cases. She said anyone who has committed an offence is an offender and should be treated as such. Yes, but are they a male offender or are they a female offender? That matters when you're putting them in prison. She went on, but we should not, because we wouldn't do this with any other community, apply that somehow that is an issue for the rest of the trans community. But it very, very seriously is. Trans prisoners are in prison, that's 60% of them, for sex crimes. Whereas the normal rate amongst normal people, it would, prisoners, it would be 6%. So trans are, by the government's own figures, 10 times more likely to be convicted of sex crimes than any other group. That is horrifically high, and it does have a bearing. It must have a bearing. Miller has already admitted his crimes and awaits sentencing for 4 charges of abduction, assault, watching videos, we say, in the presence of a child, and possessing 242 images. Scottish Conservative Shadow Equality spokesman Rachel Hamilton, MSP, said, Shona Robertson the architect of the SNP's gender reform bill, claimed there was no evidence abusive men would have to pretend to be anything else when carrying out this type of behaviour. This horrific case dispels that argument, and she is right, it does, because that was the whole point of him dressing up as a woman, was to lure a child because it was seen as less threatening. She said the SNP's self-ID legislation would allow this predator to access women's spaces had the UK government not intervened. And you have to wonder why the SNP is so determined to let men, grown men, access spaces for women, for vulnerable women, and for children, simply because they want to, because that's what it is now. Oh, I want to be a woman so I can go in there, get close to vulnerable women and then their children. And the SNP are going along with this, although we've seen from the previous video that shouldn't really come as a surprise. She added, this case shocked the local community, and my thoughts are with the young girl who suffered such appalling crimes at the hand of this dangerous offender. Miss Robinson's comments were used to justify her government's gender reform bill, but the stripping away of almost all barriers to changing legal sex, barring a 3-month period of living in an acquired gender and an age limit, sent alarm bells ringing for women's rights activists. They have argued that there is no way to tell if someone who appears to be transgender is a threat or not, so single-sex spaces should not permit those who are trans to enter. This is argued on the basis that men are excluded from female spaces for their protection, and so they should be. You shouldn't have men going into female-only spaces, especially not where there's vulnerable women, such as crisis centres or DV units, things like that, or where there's children. Why do grown men want to get so close to children? And why do the grown men who get a sexual pleasure of dressing as a woman, because they're not trans? Don't make no mistake, these people are not gender dysphoric. The rate of gender dysphoria is so amazingly tiny that they're not gender dysphoric. They're simply putting on woman face for their own fetishistic pleasures. And then they're wanting to access vulnerable women and children. And the SNP are determined to help them. But then we know what the SNP truly are now. Anyway, I shall round off and come up. It's cases like Andrew Miller which show the SNP up for what they really are. They sit there and they make these outrageous claims that such and such won't happen. Oh, this has never happened before. No one will ever do this. And then almost immediately these things happen and it undermines their very argument. But they won't accept that it's wrong. They'll still be pushing to push this particular bill through for some reason. It's not popular with the public. It's not popular with other parties. There's a lot of resistance to it. Women's advocacy groups say it is wrong. They want to give men access to women's spaces, but they're not prepared to let women have a say on this. Even when they were doing the bill and drafting the bill, the committees were hearing from men's groups, from trans groups. They were hearing from men who had this fetish. But not once did they permit women to speak to the communities, to the committees. They actually had an outright refusal to hear from a crisis centre. They demanded the right to present evidence to the committee, and the committee denied them, wrote to them and said no. So the committee clearly made its mind up in advance that despite this pretense of hearing evidence, it was clearly going to push to allow men to have this ability to do these things without any safeguarding or protection of women. And then the line that no man has ever done these things was pushed around. And now that argument is false. It's gone. It's history. And so should the SNP be. They are actually out and deliberately harming the safety of women and children. But that should come as no surprise. And I'll finish there. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see here on the channel, please hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well. If you're a man, stay out of women's spaces, and goodbye.